First, I'd like to just say hello to everyone and thank you for joining us for our Environmental Candidate Forum for King County Council Position 3 and Issaquah City Council Position 5. I am Lindsay Frickle, Executive Director of the Issaquah Alps Trails Club. Our organization has worked to preserve, protect, and promote the Issaquah Alps for over 40 years, and we are very happy to be partnering on this event tonight with the People for Climate Action Issaquah and the Friends of the Issaquah Salmon Hatchery. Our organizations are equally invested in the perspectives and priorities of our elected officials regarding our local environment and climate change. Leadership from our three organizations have collaborated to offer our candidates questions that would address public concerns related to tonight's theme. Candidates will have the opportunity to make opening statements of 90 seconds each, followed by 6 questions that were sent to the candidates in advance. Each candidate will have then 90 seconds to answer each of these questions, followed by a moderated Q&A from the audience. So we look forward to hearing from all of our candidates tonight, but first, I just have a little housekeeping. We are on Zoom webinar, this platform where all audience members are muted, but we will encourage you to ask questions during using the Q&A at the very bottom of your screen. It says Q&A, and you can submit your questions throughout right there, and we will get to as many of them as we can at the end of the evening. Candidates, I will be using a timer, which will make the following noise. So please, if you hear that noise while you're speaking, just respect the time of others and try to get to your final point of that topic. So before we begin, it is important to the Issaquah Alps Trails Club to make the following land acknowledgement. We want to acknowledge that we are standing on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people, who have stewarded these lands since time immemorial. We know that we have a lot to learn, and it is our intention to respect, engage, and collaborate with tribal governments in our work to preserve and protect Native lands. So without further ado, I'd like to give our candidates the opportunity to introduce themselves. We will start with our King County Council Position 3 candidates. Let's see here, do we have Sarah? Great. So we'll start with, I'll go through the agenda here of candidates. We have Jason Voice, and you have 90 seconds.
Apologies, did you say King County Council candidates are going first?
Oh, do I have everyone switched around? I certainly do. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
We would like to start with Issaquah City Council Position 5 candidates. And Jason, if you don't mind, apologies for that.
No problem. Well, thank you. My name is Jason Voice, and I am running for Position 5 on Issaquah City Council. I'd like to thank everyone involved tonight, including the People for Climate Action, Issaquah Alps Trails Club, as well as Friends of Issaquah Salmon Hatchery. A little fun fact about me is I was actually born in Costa Rica. I was born to a Costa Rican mother and an American father. And I think anybody here, and I think probably most people here, know that Costa Rica punches far above its weight when it comes to conservation and environmental issues. I'm also a woodworker. So yes, the smell of pine and cedar, as well as walnut, is something tremendous that I've been smelling since I was working age. And the other thing is I'm a volunteer. Currently, I serve as a Planning Policy Commissioner for the City of Issaquah, as well as just wrapping up some service on the Mayor's Recovery Task Force. I do truly believe that public service is at the heart of it is volunteerism. It's all of these three things kind of intrinsically are who I am, and I'm looking forward to talking to all of you tonight and having a wonderful conversation about conservation. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jason. And we will move on to City Council Position 5 candidate, Rose Zibrat.
So hello, I'm Rose. I'm also running for Position 5. I've lived here in Issaquah for over 5 years, but I'm originally from Pittsburgh. My background is in geology and computer science, and despite my enthusiasm for rocks and fossils and computers, my true passion is public service and helping others. So over the past few years, I volunteered as a tutor at Monroe Correctional Complex, and before that at King County Libraries. I'm also a member of CERT, which stands for Community Emergency Response Team, if you didn't know, and a volunteer emergency worker for Issaquah. I've long wanted to run for public office, and until this year, I've just put it off till later. So yeah, this year I decided I cannot put it off any longer, and I decided to become the change I want to see. I always thought we need more scientists in government, so I decided that this year's the year I'm going to do it. I believe that public services are an investment into ourselves, into our community, our future, and I take a very scientific, methodical approach to all problems. I consider it my most basic responsibility to become the expert of a problem, to gather all the relevant data before even considering solutions. And one of the biggest problems I see with policymaking in general is the lack of foresight for future generations. We have to take into account how our decisions are going to affect our children several generations from now. We cannot only consider the needs of the here and now. So my priorities include environmental protections, actions against the effects of climate change, access to public transportation, and then addressing the many faces of social equity. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Rose. And next is Russell Joe. You have 90 seconds.
Good evening. I'm Russell Joe. I want to thank all the sponsors for putting this event together and all the viewers that are tuned in tonight. If we take an active role in our government and are aware of the facts and the different issues that are impacting our city, I think we'll have a great place that could be respected and admired by our neighbors. As many of you know, I served on the Issaquah City Council from the years 2000 to 2007, 2 terms. It was a very exhilarating time for me as a young lawyer at that time. And I thoroughly enjoyed the experience and thoroughly enjoy working on public policy. Right now, I serve as a municipal manager for a local garbage and recycling company. And in my job, I'm at the forefront of new innovations that are going on in the recycling industry, new technologies are coming online, waste to energy innovations that are going on at our Roosevelt landfill, helping preserve our environment. Also in my job, I have an opportunity to work closely with elected officials from Sammamish, Bellevue, North Bend, our closest neighbors on many different issues. I would bring that experience and those connections to our fellow electeds if I were elected to office in position number 5. I have also experience as a pro tem judge and a prosecutor. That legal background has given me the ability to carefully analyze the questions and issues before a council or before the bench. And I believe that ability will be very important as we weigh the important issues impacting Issaquah in the years to come. Finally, I have a wealth of experience as a nonprofit leader and as a nonprofit volunteer on the Chinese Information Service Center board. And I served as a administrative officer for the Japanese Cultural and Community Center of Washington, excuse me. And then I've been a volunteer for Rotary and for other organizations in our area. I hope to bring that experience, that volunteerism, and that energy to this position if I were elected. Please vote for Russell Joe on August 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. And we will now move on to the true King County Council positions, position 5 candidates. We'll start with Sarah Perry.
Position 3 candidates, is that right?
Position 3, thank you.
Just checking, making sure I'm in the right room. Okay. Hi, I'm Sarah Perry. My video is finally working, so the timing worked out. I'm running for King County Council District 3, and I want to thank you very much for hosting this and providing this opportunity, and thank everyone who is with us tonight watching or who will watch it as well. I'm a small business owner. I've worked in nonprofit and university settings for 30 years, managing budgets from 3 to 20 million. As an enthusiastic coalition builder, I'm also known for my expertise in creating strong foundations of civic collaboration and engagement to build progress in both local and statewide communities. I'm running for county council because we need a champion who embraces diversity and economic opportunity for all, and will fight for affordable housing and transit and against climate change with the urgency required to protect all of our communities. We need someone who will not only listen, but will bring results at this critical time with a forward-thinking vision. Bringing our communities together and learning from what the pandemic has taught us requires new skills, new connections, and innovative thinking, and we can't afford to go back to the old ways of doing things. I'm grateful to have earned the endorsement of Governor Inslee, Congresswoman Kim Schreier, Attorney General Bob Ferguson, Washington Conservation voters, 350 Seattle and Eastside firefighters, and over 100 more who've watched me deeply engage our communities over the last 5 years. Our campaign priorities are protecting our open spaces, water, forest, farms, and providing effective transit connections and alternatives for working families first, supporting all small businesses, not just a few, in full COVID recovery, because when they thrive, all of our communities thrive. Our campaign's off to a great start with support from over 570 individuals to date, and I'm fundraising and canvassing every day, have volunteer canvasses every weekend for the strongest possible turnout, and would be honored to have your support as well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sarah. Move on to Joe Cohen now.
All right, my name is Joe Cohen, and I'm running for King County Council District 3. So first of all, thanks for having this forum. I grew up a few blocks from Lake Sammamish, and I've enjoyed our area's lakes and trails and natural beauty my entire life. So the protection of the environment in our area is incredibly important to me. So I'm in this race because I have close to 20 years of experience in the fields of law and policy that's directly applicable to the unprecedented challenges we face right now. And I want to apply that experience to represent our area during this time. I'm a third-generation Washingtonian, live here in Issaquah, and grew up in Bellevue. My background includes work at the U.S. Department of Justice, where I led government oversight investigations into the activities of federal law enforcement agencies. I also worked on Senator Maria Cantwell's legislative staff. I also worked in the Obama White House on issues related to drugs and addiction. Unfortunately, there are things that are still around right now, like the opiate epidemic and fentanyl. I'm also an attorney. I practice telecom law, where I help companies understand and comply with complex government regulations. In my practice, I've been able to represent a wide range of clients, from small radio stations to large publicly traded technology companies. I've also offered free legal services to those facing eviction who are low income. Thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Great. Thank you, Joe. And last but definitely not least, Kathy Lambert. Oh, I think you're on mute still.
Thank you very much. I'm Kathy Lambert. I am your King County Council member, and I have had the pleasure of representing you and working on all these topics. So it isn't making promises, it's doing and delivering. And as you know, King County is a leader across the country in many of these topics as we deal with our clean air and clean water and our trails and our open spaces. This is the largest of all the districts in the county. We have many rivers, and we also purchase a lot of property so that we will have open spaces. And I am also a supervisor on the flood control district. I was one of the founders of the flood control district because we saw that we had many projects that needed to be done and that we did not have enough income source for the needs. And so we formed the flood control district in 2007. So I have served on that. We now have very elaborate plans for each of our watersheds. And as you know, the WIRAs, which I do sit on the WIRA board, and we each year have grants to make sure that the local environmental projects are done. I also have very much interested in our environment and our leachate and our biosolids and our nutrients. I am the chair of the Regional Water Quality Committee, and so I am working on the Clean Water Plan. And also I have been to 14 plants in the world to look on how we can better deal with our environment and how we deal with our garbage. I am the grandmother of 18. And so while the Indians talk about the 7th generation, I highly respect that. And I tell them that I really think about that each day because I have so many grandchildren. I have a motivation to make sure that I leave them a beautiful environment to enjoy. Thank you.
Right on time. Okay. Without further ado, we will move along to our environmental and climate-based questions. Again, we will have 90 seconds per candidate to go ahead and give your answer. And I will be timing that as well to help everyone along. And we would like to start with question number 1, which is, what is your campaign's platform and commitment to advance Issaquah or King County's climate action so that Issaquah or King County achieves its greenhouse gas reduction targets, example, a 50% reduction by 2030? If you could please explain specifically how you would accomplish this in concert with your council members, city or county staff, and with volunteer organizations such as the 3 hosts that we have here this evening. And I will start going back to our city council candidates and starting with Jason Voice.
Well, thank you again, Ms. Frickle. So one of the first things that I would do would be to continue the close cooperation between the planning policy as well as our very brand new environmental board, which we're all very excited about in the city. I'm going to try and stay in my lane with the city of Issaquah here. But, you know, what's funny is I'm actually supposed to be attending a meeting with them right now. The PPC and the environmental board are actually walking around Issaquah right now talking about Title 18 and a few other things. So very important, sad to miss it, but very happy to be here with all of you today. And I think letting our residents be the guide of our priorities is the best way you can be a best representative. And fortunately for us here in Issaquah, our residents have made it very clear that environmental considerations, conservation, land use is not only a top priority, but it's a guiding principle. So we're very fortunate to have our residents that we have. I think continually looking to people and organizations, city leaders such as the 3 organizations here today is also very important when shaping policy, because our city is very fortunate to have this built-in brain trust with organizations that are so passionate about this particular subject. So looking towards those organizations, I know the city council currently already does, but engaging with them and having a dialogue and being able to have back and forth with them, I think is one of the best ways to shape not only great policy, but what it is that our residents actually want here in the city.
Great. Thank you so much, Jason. We'll move along to Rose Zabrat.
Right, so my commitment to advance Issaquah's climate action plan is 110%. Preparing our community for the effects of climate change is one of my top priorities. Issaquah is still in the middle of developing its first climate action plan, which should be adopted in December of this year. But in the recommendations document, there are several good starting points. I think that one of the ways we'll see a larger impact at a local level will be through education. If we allow our population to keep growing at the same rate and we keep our current habits, our actions will be for essentially nothing. So we need to have an educated population that is enthusiastic, or at the very least willing to learn and maybe change their habits about reducing their carbon footprint. And while it'd be great to have our residents on board, we also need to talk about and address waste from large corporations that are here in Issaquah. Another significant reduction, I think, will come from reforming the Title 16 Building and Construction Code and the Title 18 Land Use Code. Some specific examples, as you asked for, would be such as updating the minimum amount of insulation in new construction, which would reduce the energy needed to heat and cool buildings, requiring electric appliances over natural gas. We have the Clean Energy Transformation Act in Washington, which should help us see 100% renewable energy sources for electric utilities, hopefully by 2045. And by building up urban forests, which will help reduce the urban heat island effect, which I talked about last week. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Rose. And finally, for our city council position, Russell. Joe.
Thank you. I believe that it's important for the city of Issaquah to be a leader in the environmental arena. It should be our goal, I think, to lead the east side, because we have the most to lose and the most to gain as our city is so close to the forested hillsides. And I think there are tangible goals that we can set out as policy for a city that we can work for, that show that we're serious about climate. One of them would be that the city fleet would go to electric vehicles at a rate of perhaps 10% initially, and then increase that percentage each year to get to a 40% or 50% electric use by 2030. Also, we'd want to have our contractors and our anyone that's providing services to our city meet a minimum standard of natural gas use for renewable energy use in the delivery and production of their goods to our city. Also, the power that we draw from our city, we can set an example for other cities by saying that 10% of our energy use for city buildings will be natural gas or renewable energy, and that 10% would increase by 1% each year until we reach whatever goal we as a council have decided. Now, we're doing this so that we set a demand for these goods from the power companies and also set an example for our fellow cities. Doing this, putting this plan together, will help show that we're very serious about this along the way, and that we want to set an example through our very actions. Finally, as Sound Transit is coming, we have a terminus. It's going to be for the light rail. We need to think about the infrastructure there and how many environmentally sensitive things can we do there, including electric vehicle infrastructure, so that we can have a hub where people can recharge their cars, still shop in Issaquah, and then get back on to their daily lives with as little friction and as little barrier to their free movement as possible. I think if we take all these goals and work them together, we're going to have the ability to set the agenda, show that we're serious about it, and make the other cities come up to our level on climate action. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell Joe. And now on to our King County Council position, number 3 candidates. We'll start with Sarah Perry.
Well, we need to determine whether we've met our targets each year in the 8 or 9 years since the Climate Action Plan was established. So first of all, really focusing on that. And if not, have we increased the goals for the subsequent years to still meet those targets, and determine what we need to change to actually specifically accomplish that. So, walking along and really looking at where we are. And then as King County, determining the progress against the defined goals and the climate action plans for things that we have direct control over as King County, including our own fleet of vehicles. Is it meeting its environmental goals, and our King County buildings and facilities meeting goals regarding King County, or regarding the greenhouse gas emissions? So, doing our own housekeeping first. How are we doing on that? And from there, we would partner with the city council members and staff of the 7 cities in our district, focusing on their climate action plans and working with community action and advocacy groups such as People for Climate Action to work together to meet our goals and to continually monitor and audit needed changes and modifications to the plans to meet the goals on time. So I've been visiting farms and meeting regularly with our environmental leaders throughout our district for years, and specifically since January in the focus of the campaign to dialogue about the issues. I'm also speaking with residents at the doors every day to hear their concerns about climate change. And I look forward to working with many of these groups and representatives on the King County District Community Coalition once elected.
Thank you, Sarah. And we'll move on to Joe Cohen now.
So all levels of government need to do their part to reduce greenhouse gases and combat climate change, whether it's cities, counties, the state, federal, and really internationally, if we're going to truly make meaningful progress. And simply put, King County needs to be a leader in this area. If the largest county in an environmentally conscious area like the Pacific Northwest is not leading the way, then what can we really expect from the rest of the country? So King County has set laudable goals to cut emissions, including 50% by 2030. Unfortunately, it is not on track to meet those targets. So from 2008 to 2017, countywide emissions fell by only 1.6%. So what we need to do is look at the biggest sectors of emissions and tackle them head on. So for example, transportation is a very key sector. It makes up 22% of emissions in King County. And we need to invest in public transportation to get cars off the road. Light rail, buses, non-motorized forms of transportation, such as bike lanes and walking paths. It's also regional. K4C, the King County Cities Climate Collaboration, is important in this regard. And also volunteer organizations and private industry. We need to work with all stakeholders to really make meaningful progress.
Thank you, Joe. And we'll move on now to Kathy Lambert.
Thank you. Well, many of us moved here because we love the beauty in our surroundings, and we want to be able to have a beautiful place to live, to breathe and be healthy, and to recreate. So the things that they've been talking about are very important, and you'll be pleased to know that they have already been done. The Action Climate Plan, the K4C, is not on track to meet the goals, and we had quite a debate about that recently. And the one side of the debate said we should make deliverable goals, and the other said we should have aspirational goals. I was on the deliverable goals because it's easier to figure out if you've made your deliverable, if you had a deliverable goal, as opposed to an aspirational goal. But we did recently just pass the Climate Action Plan, and I added one of the sectors, as the previous member said, candidate said, the transportation sector is huge. And so each year we have gone back to Congress and been very successful in lobbying them to help us to afford the electric bus fleet, which we are doing. We just recently passed a bill that would be to have electric charging stations in each of our new multifamily housings. We also, I added to the Climate Action Plan that we would also start monitoring our landfill more carefully. There's methane being collected, but there is methane that is escaping that is not properly being monitored. We have open space purchases each year. We have water works projects that we do. We are also, as you probably know, how we just completed recently, planting 1 million trees. I did not plant all of them, but I was part of the planting of those trees. And in the K4C, we do offer our environmental expertise to the smaller cities because they are not able to have that expertise. So it is a project that is usually unanimous among the council members because it's important to all of us and to our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, we will move on to question number 2 of the evening, which is something that is on a lot of our minds these days. With the unusually hot and dry weather and a major increase in outdoor recreation over the past year, wildfire risk is on everyone's mind. How do you plan to support healthy and resilient forests and the mitigation of wildfire risks in King County and Issaquah? And we'll start with Issaquah with our City Council Position number 5 candidates. And Jason, will you please kick this question off for us?
I would love to. So one of the ways we can basically address wildfires, as we've all seen the last few years, getting hotter, getting drier, the fires in the state getting worse, is to work with some of our tremendous partners that we have, namely Eastside Fire and Rescue. I just had the privilege of being on the Mayor's Recovery Task Force, and we just did something phenomenal. We took a threat, the COVID threat, and through persistence with the administration's help, we brought the only mass vaccination site to the east side here in our city. That wasn't by accident. The county, was not very helpful, but through Eastside Fire and Rescue and also the Snoqualmie Tribe, we were able to do it. And I also want to give a big hat tip to Battalion Chief Andy Stevens for his tremendous help and support. Also talking with state agencies. So we're talking the Department of Natural Resources, Washington State Parks, asking them for best practices and basically looking toward local arborists and ecologists, and also supporting popular programs such as the EFR program, which has a strong public relations with our Commissioner of Land, Hillary Franz. So all of these things in conjunction will help to address this problem. But I think one of the most important things we can do is empower our local residents, right? So all of these wonderful people that use our streams, these are the people we want to turn into forest stewards, so we can tell them, when you see something, say something. Maybe make a repository where we can put in areas of concern, issues of concern, so we can address them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And we'd like to hear from Rose.
Yeah, so I think one of the first things we need to do is establish a community wildfire protection plan, which will describe our response should we have to encounter a wildfire, how we protect our structures, evacuation plans, and how we can ensure that our community is prepared. So public education about preparedness will always be a priority of mine, because it just vastly improves our collective chances of withstanding natural disasters, wildfires included. We should make sure that everyone knows what they need to do in the event of an emergency, and that they have the supplies on hand that they would need. Again, reforming our construction and land use codes will also be incredibly important in addressing wildfire risk, such as requiring the use of fire-resistant construction materials, perhaps mandating a defensible buffer zones, and using native plants with low flammability. As to supporting resilient forests, I would have to defer to the experts, because my expertise is in rocks and long dead fossils, not living things. So I will defer to the experts on that and see what they have to say.
Thank you, Rose. And Russell, you're up next.
Thank you. August 3rd is National Night Out, and there will be a big celebration at City Hall. I would encourage everyone to come to that celebration and learn about Eastside Fire and Rescue and our wonderful police force. And Eastside Fire and Rescue is an interesting organization. Dave Kapler and I had the opportunity to serve together on their board as representatives from the city of Issaquah. And I learned a lot during my time on the board. And I think that we have to look at the fire danger from a personal property point of view first. Each of us has a responsibility to cut the branches away that overhang our roofs. We have a responsibility to clear away the area around our house of debris as much as possible. We should look toward changing out the dry grasses with mulch or other material that helps retain the moisture in the soil to lessen the fire danger around our homes as well. Doing those things certainly helps, and policy can certainly be set a little bit from either the council level or the fire district in terms of, we had quite an issue with the shingles on houses in Kohani being wood shingles that could dry out and present a fire danger during the 4th of July, for instance. Now, whether or not that issue needs to be examined and some policy needs to be set for encouraging metal roofs for everybody or a fire resistant roof, those are policies that need to be set as well along the way to help guide how we're going to address these issues. I think that with forests as well, we need to make sure that we're carefully monitoring them and encourage them so that the moss grows and the forest is able to maintain its moisture as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. And next up, we'll have our Sarah Perry.
Well, first of all, with our National Night Out on August 3rd, everybody needs to vote first and then do that. Very important. We need to first make sure that our rural areas, our forests, and our open spaces are healthy and as fire resistant as possible. Where the forests meet the urban boundary, we have to keep them especially clear to protect our life and property and focus on that particularly. Firewise is a DNR program that works with private landowners to help them manage their forests through urban wildland interface and forest management. So I will work with them and partner with them as well. I've been endorsed by Washington Conservation Voters, Hillary Friends, Eastside, Redmond, and Renton firefighters, and will collaborate with and partner with WCV, Hillary, and others toward maintaining the most healthy and resilient forest possible. Now we have forests in the federal, state, city, and private and county and private landowners forests as well. So we have a lot of area to take care of, from east and West Lake, east and West Lake Sammamish, all the way to Snoqualmie Pass and the Snohomish border to the base of the city of Issaquah. This is just huge, and we have a special responsibility, and we need a lot of attention to that. And so I am really excited to work together with partners to bring about the most healthy and resilient forest we can. And I cede the rest of my time.
Perfect timing. Thank you, Sarah. Okay. And we will move to the next person up. Joe, you have 90 seconds.
Yeah, this is an issue that gets more and more important every year. We saw just a few weeks ago, there was a brush fire in Maple Valley, not too far away from right here in Issaquah. And in the last few years, on a couple of occasions, we've seen ash coming down from, like snow, really, from fires in eastern Washington. So all signs point to the risk of wildfires increasing in our area due to climate change. So this district includes a lot of open spaces, forests, vegetation that are near population centers, which creates a real safety concern and a concern for property, people's homes. So the bottom line is that we need to be proactive in making sure that wildfire mitigation is taken into account. And this is where the experts come in. We need to work with the experts to make sure we're using the latest science to support healthy forest strategies and mitigation for fire prevention. It also means educating stakeholders. This is a risk that is increasing, and we need to increase the education appropriately so that everyone is aware of fire mitigation strategies and can be vigilant. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And we have Kathy to bring this one home.
Thank you. Well, the county does have a large part of our land that is open space. Most people don't realize the volume of open space that we have, and that we continue to buy more acreage each year. So we have a very developed river and lands department, and it is their job to stay on top of all of the latest research. We have forest stewardship plans for individual forest owners, as well as corporate forest owners. We have the Ag Commission that also has very specific rules that they deal with. And as far as individuals, having fire resistant plants, knowing where you're putting your bark, if you're going to use bark. And when we had the fire in Carnation a number of years ago, we learned that we had a lot of bark around public infrastructure, which made it more flammable. So after we saw that, we made very substantive changes. Firewise is a wonderful program that I have supported for years and years. And as the chair of one of the committees a couple of years ago, we did an entire evacuation and plan. And if you look at my website, you'll see that there are many things about emergency preparedness on it. In addition, we updated on my committee all of the state and county EOC, emergency operations planning, so that we would be well prepared. I am very much supportive of what the President of the United States has just done recently in dealing with the underbrush and saying that he was going to hire firemen year round. I think that is so important, that we not only have them available when it's fire season, but then in the other seasons that we have them available to do the work, so that we will have the best and cleanest and safest forest possible. And as last but not least, I am the one that has kept the helicopter for the county going. And if you ask for the ability to get up and down out of the helicopter, it is called the Lambert lift. And that is important during a fire, that we be able to get people in and out. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, in the interest of giving folks a chance to go first or last or somewhere in between, I'm going to switch up our list a little bit and make sure to keep everyone in the correct county or city category while I do so. So question number 3, this is a multi-part question. However, our candidates have received these in advance, so we will allow you to go ahead and address those various parts in your answer. Issaquah's utility company, Puget Sound Energy, has increased its coal and natural gas use, according to the city's latest greenhouse gas inventory. They also burn these fossil fuels to produce electricity. These trends have caused an increase in Issaquah's greenhouse gas emissions. How can the city or county work with PSE and to promote cleaner energy sources such as wind and solar to help our climate? The second part of the question is, have you or will you accept campaign contributions from Puget Sound Energy? Yes or no? And finally, do you support the establishment of a public utility district, a PUD, in Northeast King County, including Issaquah, to replace Puget Sound Energy as the district's electrical power provider? So that's a mouthful, I know. So I know you've all had time to think about it. And I will go ahead and start with our King County Council candidates first. And I'd like to ask Joe, if you would start us off.
Yeah, so I firmly believe that we should be moving away from fossil fuels to cleaner forms of energy, such as wind and solar. King County certainly has a role to play in working with Puget Sound Energy to promote cleaner forms of energy. And part of this is King County being a leader itself in combating climate change and really setting the tone for our area. King County also has a role to play in working with community organizations to understand their concerns and give voice to them. You mentioned the public utility district. Regarding establishment of a public utility district to replace Puget Sound Energy, I know there are many who are not satisfied with Puget Sound Energy's progress on moving away from fossil fuels. Creating a public utility district is a significant step, and I would want to understand it fully before making a determination. On the last question, I have not accepted campaign contributions from Puget Sound Energy and will not be. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I would like to ask Sarah Perry to follow him with your answers.
Okay, thank you. So PSE will be fossil fuel free within this decade by state law. So that's a settled issue. However, I'm always interested in having more conversations about how it might move faster, knowing that any change to the current timetable costs money because it involves conversion, which is costly, and then that would be transferred to the customer. So I would love to have those conversations. It really does have an impact on each of us. And so we need to be aware of that and, you know, have that public conversation. But I am always open and interested in those conversations. I will not accept campaign contributions from PSE. I have signed a pledge to that effect with other organizations. And as far as the establishment of a public utility district in Northeast King County, you know, there's a lot of conversation about that. And I recently met with some folks around this particular issue, but it seems to me that there are very few people who have yet been in that conversation. And when I'm talking to people who are in the 5th and the 45th district, for example, who are longtime environmental leaders, and they are not involved in those deeper conversations, it concerns me. So it doesn't feel like it's far enough along yet. I also am aware that the tribes have not been engaged, and that's a very important element in all of this. If we're looking at Snoqualmie and the water, all of these areas, we need to be talking to the tribes. So I feel like it's not yet far enough along, and I would love to talk again about it, hear more about it, and know where the conversation goes when some of these other folks that I've known and are very deeply involved in the environmental community have been engaged in the conversation. See where we go from there. And yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. And Kathy, we'd like to hear from you next.
Thank you. Well, I am very concerned about this because we need to make sure we have enough power for the things that we are planning. We need to have enough power for our electric cars, for more computers, for more TVs. Who knows what else is coming down the road? Maybe robots, maybe one that will clean my house. So we need to have plenty of electrical, and we need to make sure that we are planning not only for the current electrical needs, but the growing population and the growing new technologies. So I do not want to see any blackouts. And what we saw earlier on in Texas and the South is not okay. So when you look at the windmills, it takes lots of land. I did go to Denmark and talk to them about their windmills, which are offshore. So that would be something that I think would be interesting. Solar panels don't need as much sun as they originally did. So looking at having solar panels on our homes would be something that I would also be interested. But right now we need to look at reducing our reduction of our own use, turning off lights, especially if you have teenagers. And one of the things that I'm very interested in, and you can look at my webpage, this goes back 16 years of study, because there's a lot to study, and I expect there will always be lots to study on this, is waste to energy, and how can we turn our garbage into our power supply, and also collect our methane that comes off of the landfills as we still have those landfills. There are many different kinds of technologies for waste to energy, and some people like one technology, some people don't. But in the 16 years, there are new technologies that, not this year, but next year, I'll be going to Switzerland to look at one of the new ones there, on my own dime, by the way. As far as PSC, I have set up flood control districts and different businesses. It is not an easy project to set up a new agency like this. So I think working with our existing PSC and their government representatives, both Julian Lowe and Renee Zimmerman, who are easy to get in touch with anytime. On the bill, if you look at the bottom, there's an opportunity to designate money to go into the green account. I think let's think about how we can help them be motivated to get that green, because we have given them the opportunity. The one thing I am most concerned with is I want all of our utilities with local ownership. I don't want another country to decide how our power grid will be done and making those kinds of decisions. So again, going back to the waste to energy, many countries in the world are producing their energy off of their garbage. And I have been to Germany and much of Europe to look at these. They work. And I think it's time that we look at that kind of technology to help us to meet the green future.
Thank you, Kathy. We'll go to our City Council Position 5 candidates now, and I'd like to start this time with Rose.
Sure. So at a city level, I'm not sure what we can do beyond us advocating for cleaner energy sources to be used. That feels more like a larger scale problem to be solved at a higher level of government, but I will absolutely advocate for cleaner energy sources. I will never accept any campaign contributions from any corporation, full stop, no exceptions. And I will always support the establishment of publicly owned utilities. Investor-owned for-profit utilities will never and have never had the best interests of the public in mind. I mean, their only purpose is to increase the value to their shareholders. And Puget Sound Energy was most recently sold in 2018 and currently belongs to several foreign investors, I think in Canada and the Netherlands. So I think I've touched on all 3 questions there, I'll yield the rest of my time.
Sorry, I was muted there. Thank you, Rose. I'd like to ask Jason to go next.
Well, thank you again. And to the previous point, yeah, at the city level, it's more of a moot point. There are things we can do, and that is use our voice. We'll play on words there. But as far as, we can ask them to bring back some of the subsidies, like they did with the EV infrastructure that they discontinued, possibly looking at things for green built homes and solar usage. But the city itself actually is part of a program called Green Direct. So the government of the city actually does get their energy from solar and wind, but it's not available to residents and it's not available to our commercial recipients. So we can encourage them to do the right thing and expand it for everybody in the city. I think sitting on advocacy and advisory boards is very important. It's already been mentioned, but the Cities for Climate Collaboration, also known as KC4, is a good place to have your voice heard. But as to the other 2 questions, no, I would not accept any of their campaign contribution. It's not appropriate. This is a local election meant for our residents. But I would establish a dialogue with them. Nothing gets done by ignoring one another. And so it's important to talk to one another and hopefully a positive relationship where we can encourage them to do the right thing. And then as far as the PUD, again, it's kind of echo here. I haven't seen anything come across our packets or agendas at the Planning Policy Commission. So I truly don't know where I would stand. I know that what I would do is I would take our residents' voices, have them basically explain what they want and take their considerations into account to hopefully make the best decision for our city.
Thank you, Jason. And last but certainly not least, Russell Joe.
Thank you. I think that we can take a cue from the last legislative session where the bill that was passed called the Producer Responsibility Act, it required a certain amount of content in materials that were produced by companies. They had to have a certain amount of recyclable material in anything that they were putting out. And so knowing that when the detergent container goes into the recycling bin and a company processes it, they know that when they put it into the big block through their process and then sell it off to their buyer to be made into other goods, there's a guaranteed amount of recyclable material in there by law. And that creation of a demand market has been very helpful to stabilize the recycle market that's kind of been in a little bit of turmoil. I believe we can do the same thing in the city of Issaquah by, as I pointed out earlier, demanding that any of our contractors use a certain amount of renewable energy in their processes or in their delivery of goods. We can ask that when we do RFPs, requests for proposals from our garbage companies or any other company that's making a bid, we could request a certain amount of renewable energy be required in any of their production and delivery of goods to us as well. By creating that demand for the renewable energy, it does help stabilize the market for the producer of those energies and thereby driving prices down. So we can create that market, create stabilization for them. On the issue of the PUD, I'm a little concerned about the amount of capital investment that is really needed. You have to buy all the assets first, and then you have to maintain those assets through the rates that are being charged. And then any new technologies that come along that are expensive are very hard to get the money for if you're being stretched by just doing the maintenance and the capital purchases. So I'd want to see a good financial plan for all that before I would even consider supporting a PUD. And last on the campaign contributions, our election campaign here in Issaquah is a little too small for a company like Puget Sound Energy to take an interest in. So I'd be surprised if they gave any money to any of the candidates, any of the races. But I wouldn't accept money from Puget Sound Energy through this campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. We will give another round to our City Council Position 5 candidates for this next question. So we'll start with City Council again, and then we'll go back down to our King County Council candidates after that for question 4. So the question is, how do you plan to collaborate with tribal governments while balancing the priorities of the outdoor recreation community, very important in Issaquah, and the healthy stewardship of our public lands? And I'd like to ask Jason to go first on this one.
Thank you. Well, as I mentioned before, the city just pulled off something incredible with one of our local tribes, and it's worth mentioning again. The only mass vaccination site on the east side, again, that was a lot of hard work. That didn't just happen. That was because we were out there, we made it known that we were welcoming it, we wanted it, we pushed it, and the administration made it happen. A brainchild was brought to the city by the Recovery Task Force. And what that did is it built a lot of goodwill. The tribe is the one who allocated those vaccines. We were not able to get many from the county itself. So there is some incredible goodwill to build upon with our local tribes. So right there, we need to take advantage of that. In the fall, I believe the city council will be hearing from one of our local tribes, and they're going to share some of their concerns about land use, about recreational use, and also ongoing projects and development. So it's an opportunity for all of us to get better acquainted and to take, I believe you had mentioned it, Ms. Frickle, you know, these lands, these generations go back, you know, eons and eons, and we have a lot to learn. And so to build on the goodwill of the spring, that incredible victory that we all shared in, and again, they were a big part of, and listen to their concerns this fall in the city council chambers, and just hear them out and hear what they have to say in a respectful manner. I think that's vitally important. So I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to have those conversations if I'm lucky enough to sit on the city council.
Thank you, Jason. I'd like to ask Russell Joe to go next.
Thank you. In law school, I took 3 different courses on Indian law. So Indian law, advanced Indian law, and 1 semester in the Indian Law Clinic. I have a deep understanding of the government to government relationship that tribes have with both the United States and with the cities in our region. Their view and outlook on the environment and the natural world is so deep and is such a part of their very self and the very identification that they have with the world, that they can teach us so much about preservation of our natural environment. I think that as we work with the tribes to preserve our environment, we're going to see that their interest is not just in tomorrow or the next 10 years or the next 100 years even, as we're trying to set policy. And as we put forward our policies and get the influence of the tribes in our policy making, I think it's going to give us a deeper understanding of our environment and a longer view of what can be done and what can be achieved, because the tribes are setting the tone for us and they're showing us what can really be done by the resilience and the time that they've been here and the preservation they've been able to achieve through their sheer will. And I would hope that I could use my experience as a lawyer, as an Indian law trained lawyer to help that. I do that in my normal job. We're working on a project with St. Edward State Park at a group called the Environmental Education Resource Center to provide education on trails at St. Edward State Park that are culturally sensitive to the native groups and tribes that have used that land for generations to hunt and fish and to live. And I believe that we can bring that same kind of reflection and same kind of education to Issaquah as we did, like we did at the Salmon Hatchery with some of the exhibits that are there. And I've encouraged us to find other opportunities to do that as well, to play so that we can have a deeper connection with the land through our education with our native tribes. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. We'd like to move to Rose Zabrat.
Right, so if I understand the gist of the question correctly, I believe it's asking us whether we will really hear the voices of the local tribal governments, especially when it comes to the topics that revolve around stewardship of public lands and outdoor recreation. For instance, I know that the Snoqualmie tribe recently launched their ancestral lands movement, which seeks to raise awareness of the cultural significance of their tribe's ancestral lands and the detriment brought about by the massive increase in outdoor recreation over the last decade-ish. And I mean, if we want to be really honest, the colonization over the last few centuries, but sticking to this movement, I'm absolutely on board with supporting movements like these. I think it's the very least we can do to help local tribes protect what they do have and to listen to what they have to say. They've already lost so much, and this is just, you know, one tiny thing we can do to help support them. So I will always be open to working with tribal governments and listening to what they have to say.
Thank you, Rose. We'll move on to our King County Council Position 3 candidates now. And this time I'd like to start with Kathy Lambert.
Thank you. Well, first of all, we both share a common goal. We both want to preserve the land, but we do know that our Native friends have a very sacred place in their heart for these lands, and especially in our area around Snoqualmie Falls. I had the privilege one day of actually seeing what they had told me about, where the water was coming over the falls so hard that the spray went up above the falls into the sky. And I was so amazed, and I was like, wow, I'm so thankful I got to see this. So it is sacred, and we want to make sure that we work together in a very collaborative way. They have been very helpful in helping us. The federal government is asking that we have our culverts redone and required at the state level. They are not yet required at the county level, but we can see the handwriting on the wall, plus it's the right thing to do. So we've been working with the tribes on helping us decide which culverts need to be repaired and replaced as quickly as possible. So sometimes a culvert might be at the end of a place where you don't really need to have that culvert, where we can move it to another culvert that does have very good environmental uses. And so they have been very helpful in collaborating with that. They also helped after they had 2 of their tribal employees killed on Highway 18. They gave money to repair and replace part of that road. As was mentioned earlier, they collaborated beautifully because they got a direct allocation for the federal government for their allocation of the vaccines. Once the county was able to have enough vaccines to go from the first target area, which was the area of the county where people have 10 years less life expectancy than in our area, then all of us were collaborating on our weekly calls. And as you know, our area has about 84% of vaccination rate, and the national rate is 65%. So we've done a very good job with their assistance and with everybody working together. I do sit on the WIRA board, and that has members from the tribe, watershed inventory resource area. And we work together on what are some of the projects that we can do. And each year the county gives money into the WIRAs for these projects. And of course, I know many members of the council, and they are very wonderful people to work with. And so they also helped the county when we decided that we needed defibrillators in each of our patrol cars. They thought that was important. And so you'll be happy to know if you have a heart attack in King County, that your local tribe helped to make sure you live. So I'm very pleased that we work together on preserving the land as well as preserving the quality of life in so many ways.
Thank you, Kathy. We'll move on to Joe Cohen now.
It's important to take into account the impact we have on areas that are crucial to tribes, including burial grounds and other places. As a telecom attorney, I've been involved in working with tribes for the siting of telecommunications infrastructure and know how important these processes are. When it comes to recreation, Part of this is collaborating with all of the stakeholders to resolve these issues. Another part is simply education. Many people just don't know about the tribes in our area and their current importance to our community. Our area has grown a lot, and there are people from all over the country and the world here, and many people just don't know. Also, one of the areas I look forward to collaborating with the tribal governments on is the area of salmon habitat restoration. Salmon numbers are low across species, from Chinook to Sockeye. Living near Lake Sammamish now, and having grown up near Lake Sammamish, the kokanee is incredibly important to me. And this is a unique species of freshwater salmon. Their numbers are extremely low. There are a lot of talented people working on this, and King County needs to be supportive in their efforts through grants or other means. And as was mentioned, the culverts around the county, there are hundreds of them that are either partially or completely blocking salmon from going upstream. And we need to make sure that we are investing in modifying these culverts to restore salmon habitat and allow salmon numbers to make a strong comeback.
Thank you, Joe. And we have Sarah Perry to hear from.
The question is, how do I plan to collaborate with tribal governments while balancing the priorities of the outdoor recreation community and the healthy stewardship of our public lands? Answering the question, the Snoqualmie Indian tribe is a sovereign nation. The relationship is government to government. They're not stakeholders, they're first people. I've signed the Snoqualmie Indian Tribe's Ancestral Lands Movement Pledge this summer to help raise awareness of the cultural significance, ecological fragility of the tribe's ancestral lands, as well as the detrimental impacts that unchecked outdoor recreation has had on them, and work to respect, restore, and protect these lands while recreating on them so that we're careful not to love them to death. This came from our current conversation. I'm in current and ongoing conversations now with the Snoqualmie Tribal Council. They are looking for a conversation and dialogue ongoing with their county council member. I look forward to continuing this with them in these areas and to collaborative work with the outdoor recreation community to ensure that we're able to steward these areas in ways that will allow our grandchildren's grandchildren and beyond to enjoy them as these areas as we do today. It's just our work to do together. So we've had unprecedented participation and activity in our outdoor spaces during the pandemic, which is really exciting. We all need to get outdoors more. It's healthy and it's wonderful. And we need to do it in a way where we are also protecting and respecting and making sure we're restoring the spaces that we're using. And right now we're creating a huge amount of damage with our love of the outdoors. So we need to pay attention to that. And part of what their movement provides is an awareness of language, an awareness of plants, an awareness of how the space is used, so that we take more of this into account while we are in these spaces that are present.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, we'll move on to our fifth question now. And this time I will let the King County Council Position 3 candidates make the first round of answers. And the question is, this is another multi-part question. Fast, sprawling land use, in particular in single family zoning, is a significant and well-documented contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, whereas compact 15-minute commutes in communities reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So our questions are, what policies or reforms will your campaign put forward as priorities for land use planning? And also, do you support significant changes to the city or county land use code to require reducing the negative environmental impacts of all new commercial and governmental construction projects within the city or county? So it's a complex question. I hope you've all had the chance to think about it a couple days in advance. So I will go ahead and start with, this time, Sarah. We would like to hear from you first.
sorry, user error is always with mine. So I will work to advance and define green building standards. You know, I am open. I'm definitely support significant changes to city and county land use code to require reducing the negative environmental impacts of all new commercial and governmental construction projects within city and county. Yes, I'm open to it, to be sure, while I'm recognizing that everything we do has an impact. So we have to ensure that it's both transparent and there's a public process and environmental review of all of our decisions together. You know, I'm a middle child and everything needs to be fair. So when we're doing these things, we have to make sure that all of our folks are taken into account. I've been endorsed by the Washington Conservation Voters, and I want to work with Washington Conservation Voters and many other advocacy groups in looking at what we can do for land use planning in the greenest possible way, meeting what we're already doing with our climate action plan and going as far as possible in that. And, you know, I want to also say I am, as we move forward, I'm very interested in the just transition work because I'm a strong labor supporter. So as we do these different things and building and making sure that we are moving forward, we want to do it at the pace of life and how it works for our families as well, and taking into account transitions that work for all of our families and our working families at the same time. So those are two different issues, and I understand that, but I do want to pay attention to making sure that we are taking care of all of our people as we're going forward in this direction.
Thank you, Sarah. I'd like to ask Joe Cohen to go next.
So we can't build more land, but our area has been growing for decades and will continue to grow. So what do? There needs to be a real balance between development and environmental protection. I strongly agree with the growth management's goal of densification in urban growth areas and avoiding sprawl. We need to preserve the open spaces that we have left, and we have a lot of them in this district. It covers the area from Lake Sammamish to the Cascade Mountains and a lot of places in between. I'm living this right now here in Issaquah. I live in a fairly new apartment complex that fits in well with the community and leads to the question about zoning changes. Certainly open to zoning changes. I also believe that these sort of changes need to involve community collaboration and need to fit within the character of the community that we're talking about. On trailheads, Metro has the Trailhead Direct program. That's a great program, gets you to trailheads. I think we can continue to improve upon that program. Certainly need to continue keeping it in existence. And we can also have some collaborations potentially with cities to say have parking lots, open parking lots where people can meet and have shuttles for people within the cities around these trails to take them to the trailheads, so that, as we know, a lot of the trailheads get very crowded with cars. We don't want to build more parking lots. So shuttles would be a good option. For example, from a Target parking lot to trailheads on Cougar Mountain or Tiger Mountain. So there's a lot of work to be done in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. We'd like to ask Kathy to speak next. Kathy Lambert.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, we have a very extensive state policy called the Growth Management Act. It has 13 originally and a 14th standard. And what it says is that all of these standards must be accomplished, that none of them are more important than the other. They all must be in balance. And one of those is that we must have a jobs housing balance. We do not have a jobs housing balance. And we have an increase in population that we are expecting by the year 2025, that the Puget Sound Regional Council has figured out what our growth is anticipated to be. So we need to be proactive and make sure that we have the housing in a variety of housing types everything from cottage houses to condos to duplexes to apartments to single family houses, a wide variety, ADUs, all kinds of different kinds of houses, so that we can provide for the coming population. The city's just got in the last month their growth targets, so they know what that needs to be. And people are concerned about making sure that the housing problems with the amount of increase in the cost of housing in this area and homelessness. I was in a meeting earlier today about not enough housing for people that are transitioning. And so it's really important that we do build houses and that we have the right amount in the right places, because the Department of Ecology told us in October that we need to make sure we have enough wastewater capabilities for these people that will be coming. So we already have very strict building standards. And every time that we pass a new growth or codes, we have public process, lots of public process. And so we have lots of opportunities for people to weigh in, but we must comply with the Growth Management Act, which is what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. We'll move to our City Council Position 5 candidates now, and we'd like to start this time with Russell Joe.
Thank you. The sprawl question doesn't directly apply to Issaquah in the sense that most of our housing has been built out all the way, filling the whole urban growth boundary that we currently have. However, we did take some significant steps to preserve open space and cluster housing when we put together the two urban villages in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. And those urban villages were designed to make sure that the housing was clustered in a way that preserved the open space, left access to trails, left parks, left space for other amenities along the way. In Issaquah, there may be an opportunity in the urban village of the Issaquah Highlands. There's some land that could be converted back to residential housing. And if that happens, then the developer potentially could get some opportunity to add some commercial development to that as well. I would closely watch that negotiation if I were elected to council to make sure that the interests of our citizens were taken care of. It is nice to have another hamburger stand or another grocery store, but at the same time, once we build on that land is gone forever in a lot of ways, and we need to make sure that we do it right. With respect to the environmental regulations, I'm always open to evaluating new technologies, new ways to do things, and look at the data that we've established for wetlands and other preservation of open space over time to figure out if there are better ways to do it. So yes, I'm always in favor of finding ways to adapt our land code to make better use of the limited resources that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. I'd like to ask Rose to be our next speaker.
Right, so I'll be suggesting more high density housing, of course, but we will have trouble becoming a 15-minute community if we do not embrace more and better public transit. Issaquah, as we all know, has traffic problems, and our traffic problems will only be exacerbated as we continue to grow in population. But we cannot expect people to stop driving a majority of the time until public transit begins to approach the convenience of driving. And some communities here do not have access to public transit, nor is it viable to walk to, say, the grocery store, the bank, or the hospital. I live in one of these communities myself. I live up in Tallis in Issaquah, and we cannot get to Safeway, BECU, or doctor's appointments unless we drive. I discussed this briefly last week, but Eastsiders are not getting back the value they put into King County Metro. We contribute 35% of the revenues, but we only see 17% of the service hours. We deserve to see a fair return on the taxes we pay. So I'll be advocating for getting the services that we already pay for to see a better public transit system here in Issaquah. Like we could use shuttles from these isolated communities to bus hubs and also to shopping centers. And on the significant changes to land use code, yes, I would absolutely support such changes. We just can't afford to keep putting those changes off. We have to begin to implement those changes now. The sooner the better.
Thank you, Rose. And last but definitely not least, we have Jason Voice.
Error message. So what's interesting right now is literally right now, we are doing Title 18 here in Issaquah. In fact, my colleagues are actually walking around the city right now. So it is happening right now. And I think another thing is to continue to push the city's Central Issaquah plan. So that is going to provide a lot of density, a lot of multifamily type of housing right now, where we have 70% impervious parking lot, impervious surface that is all our giant retailers' parking lots. So imagine a day when that beautiful land is taken up by beautiful buildings that are able to basically create another 15-minute community in the heart of our valley floor. So think of Old Town, think of the Highlands, and then you could think of the area where, I won't mention their name, but the retailers currently are. So we can, there's a lot going on, and we're all excited about it. It's going to be a long process and a labor of love. Also, we have the Title 16 updates with the building codes and construction codes. It's going to be coming up, I'm sure, after Title 18 is finished. But as far as the new government buildings and regulations, generally would be supportive of that. Again, we'd want to see what it looks like actually in print. But I do think that green buildings and green energy is going to be the standard probably in the next 10 years or so. But, you know, we need to weigh that with some of the consequences. A lot of our infrastructure here in the city is anywhere from 10, 30, 60 years old. So, you know, how punitive do we want to be if someone pulls a permit? Do they need to bring their whole structure up to code? I mean, a lot of our population would not be able to afford that. Is that right that someone who pulls a permit or goes to sell their house and this one house has been sold 3 times and they get checked, versus someone down the road who's had the house for 30 years, who's never been checked and never been upgraded? So we need to have that sensitive conversation about just how, you know, how we balance it properly.
Thank you, Jason. Now, in the interest of time, we are running a little bit short. So we would like to ask our speakers to go ahead and we'll skip question 6 and move on to some audience questions now for the sake of time. So with audience questions, I'd like to ask our speakers, our candidates, to please try to keep your answer a little bit shorter and closer to 1 minute time frame, so we can allow for everyone to have an opportunity. So the first question I have here from our audience Q&A has to do with salmon. Besides climate change, she asks, warmer conditions and non-native predators in our waters, new discoveries identify more hazards that the salmons face, including loss of canopy that shades any and all waterways, tire residue runoff, light pollution on at night and bridges and docks, eliminating safe fish passage in the dark. What policies or reforms will your campaign put forward as priorities to mitigate these impacts?
Okay, I can take this one.
Great.
So yeah, there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of good work being done on the restoration of salmon habitat. So you mentioned some of the issues going on, particularly in Lake Sammamish, close to us here in Issaquah. And there's this plant called milfoil that's in the water, and it is potentially blocking, well, actually it's hiding some other fish in the water, predators to salmon, so that they can essentially hide and then eat the small salmon fry when they're coming through. So this organization, Trout Unlimited, is looking into this issue to study it and to see if this is actually causing some of the reduction in salmon population, particularly in Lake Sammamish. So supporting those groups, providing grant money to these groups is incredibly important to continue the work, because We know that the reductions are taking place. We know some of the issues like culverts, as I mentioned before, need to be replaced. But some of the issues we just don't know about. And so continuing to study, we have a lot of smart people on this issue, and to continuing to support them is incredibly important.
Thank you, Joe. And I should have mentioned that these answering these questions is optional for our candidates, these from the audience. So I would like to invite our candidates to go ahead and volunteer yourselves, if you'd like, by unmuting to answer this salmon question.
I'd like to just answer that too, that we have opportunities every year to get grants. And so the Waterworks grant is one, the YRO grants is another. And then if it fits in with a flood district issue, it can be added to that. So if you have a particular project that you need help with, contacting our office to say what your project is, and then we will look for what category that could fit in. So make sure that you know about the Waterworks grants and the YRO grants. Thank you.
And I'd like to say that these are all really important ideas and things that we have to do, but we need some urgency in this. We just need some urgency in this. So all of this needs to happen with the urgency as if this matters. And that's the critical piece.
Thank you, Sarah. Any other comments from our candidates? Okay, I'd like to move on to one more question. That's about all we have time for this evening. So let's see, we have, okay, a question here about a little bit about traffic here. And okay, the south end of King County is growing rapidly, and the traffic through Issaquah Valley heading to and from these southern homes is large and growing larger. There's not room to broaden the Issaquah Hobart Road in an environmentally sensitive way through some traffic controls, or though some traffic controls could be implemented. What plan do you have to get these commuters out of their cars, or at least smooth some of the flow? So this is, it seems to be a local question. If our city council candidates want to address it.
Yeah, sure.
I'll go ahead and take a shot at it, or go ahead, Rose.
All right. So yeah, I've already put forward a couple traffic public transportation solutions, but also, well, I would suggest, and I probably will still suggest, giving some sort of benefit for telecommuting, for allowing employees to telecommute to keep them off the road. But I believe most of the traffic going through Issaquah is, these are people heading out of Issaquah for work. It's not our resident, well, I guess there are our residents, but also people who are just passing through. So I believe it's not just a local issue, but a regional issue as well. So we would have to work together with partnering, nearby cities and perhaps the county as well.
Thank you, Rose. I do realize Issaquah Hobart Road is in unincorporated King County, so I would like to welcome everyone to answer this question if they would like to give some input. Jason? Nope.
I'll go after Mr. Joe. He was first, but yes, I'd like to go.
Great.
Well, thank you. I think that we should, as a community, focus on the terminus that'll be coming from light rail to Issaquah in 2040. I know it seems a long way away, but we need to start thinking about it right now and have a vision for that. It's potentially going to be a 500 stall parking lot, but if we can find a way to have more flexibility with those parking spaces to increase capacity, I think it could really work to our benefit to get people through town, get them on the train, and then get them off 90, put them on the train to Bellevue or Kirkland or Seattle and whatever destination they need to get to, make it easy for them to get there. The flexibility that I see that could occur is if people do, if a pair of husband and wife were to drive into Issaquah from south of town, one had the electric car with them, the other one got on the train, The electric car could take a spot for that 20 minutes while it gets charged up, or 10 or 5 as the technology increases, and then take advantage of going to a shop or getting a cup of coffee, getting back in their car. That spot then opens up again. There's another opportunity for another car to charge there. So I think that we can find ways, if we think about the retail at that facility, whether there'll be housing on the second floor so that people don't have to even have a car. There are opportunities for us to make that facility very flexible and help reduce the overall burden to the traffic system. But we need to start thinking about it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell Joe. Jason Voice, would you like to contribute to this question?
Please. So I live on Front Street. I live on Issaquah Hobart Road, so I get the frustration that everybody feels right around 4 to 6 and 6 to 9 every single day. It's a problem, but I don't think there's a panacea for it. I don't think whether it's Sound Transit in 2042, it's the bypass that we missed. I think the game is mitigation, mitigation, mitigation. And one of the ways we're going to be able to do that is expand the city's multimodal, basically the strategic plan. One of our goals in the strategic plan is to make it more multimodal, where we can at least alleviate our residents' traffic. And some of the ways we can do this is we are going to be receiving the American Rescue Plan funds of upwards of $11 million. It's a one-time windfall that we're going to get this year half, the next year half. So we could put some of those funds towards mitigating traffic around the city. That might help alleviate some of the main arteries like Front Street, and other areas. So I think that's one way. The city also has something called the Transportation Benefit District. We built this system, but we haven't used it. So possibly being able to increase car fees, car tabs, and also looking at things like possibly a modest increase to sales tax that would go into specifically that fund, I think would be help to mitigate and to alleviate some of the deep frustrations that all of us feel, especially us down here on Front Street.
Thank you, Jason. And in the interest of time, I want to close by thanking our candidates for their time this evening. It was great to get to know you and to hear from you on these very important topics to our community. And I want to also thank our partner organizations, again, People for Climate Action, and our friends at the Issaquah Salmon Hatchery. Again, my name is Lindsay Frickle. I'm Executive Director of Issaquah Alps Trails Club. I want to thank our audience for joining us this evening to listen to our candidates. And I just want to remind everyone that we should be seeing our ballots in the mail tomorrow, as early as tomorrow, July 16th, for the August primary election. And so you have through August 3rd to get your ballots in to vote for these excellent candidates that we've heard from this evening. So thank you again, everyone, for attending tonight and joining us. And this will be recorded, so it will be shareable, and we'd be happy to share it with everyone who attended this evening.
Thank you. Thank you for a wonderful program.
Nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.